All right, class, welcome to Robin Hood, and we're going to be reading chapters 3 through 5 today. I hope that you guys all watched and listened to and read along with me with the introduction to chapter 2. How to break it up. I know it's a lot of reading, so if you just set a goal to read at least a chapter a day, Monday through Friday, you will stay on track. Hope that works for some of you. Some of you may just want to read it all at once. But the key is to just stay on top and do your work every day so that you don't fall behind. Thanksgiving is next week, guys. It's crazy that it's already here. So please do everything you can to stay on top of your schoolwork, to get caught up if you're behind, so that you can enjoy the whole Thanksgiving break and be able to spend time with your family and friends and doing the things that you have planned. And then we have a couple weeks before Christmas break, so let's make sure we just put forth the effort to stay on top and finish this quarter and finish this year of 2020 strong. Even though it's been a crazy year, online school is tough. I know you guys can do it if you can set a schedule and stay disciplined, okay? So before we dive in, let's review what we learned last time and what we read about, okay? So in chapter 1, we read about how Robin Hood became Robin Hood, right? We learned that he grew up in Sherwood Forest and that his father was the forester, but ended up getting betrayed by others, and the king caused treason on him, and he ended up dying, and then his mother ended up dying. We learned that Robin Hood was going to the city to participate in the tournament. And on his way there, he ran into the foresters and actually ran into the head forester, the guy who replaced his father. We learned that they were trying to determine who had the better shot with their bow and arrow. And Rob at the time ended up shooting one of the king's deers in the forest. And so he was, there was a bounty put on him to capture him, and then the head forester was upset that Robin had a better arrow than him, a better shot than him, and so he shot an arrow at Rob, but barely missed. Rob turned around and shot an arrow at him and ended up killing him, and so there was definitely a wanted poster for Rob. He ran into those that were the group of outlaws and wanted to go back to the tournament, and he ended up winning the tournament and gave the I think it was the golden feather or the golden arrow to Maid Marian instead of the sheriff's daughter. That made the sheriff upset. We met Will Stutley at the tournament. In the next chapter, we learned how Robin Hood at that time ran into John Little, and they fought. John Little beat him up, but was actually on his way to meet Robin Hood and the group of outlaws. And so they welcomed John Little into the group and then changed his name to Little John. And so that's where we left off, was meeting Little John, okay? So that's a little recap of where we are. So we are going to read chapters 3 through 5 today to finish off our chapters for the week. So I'm going to do this, and then I'll take off this cool picture, and then here is our book, okay? So chapter 3, how Robin Hood turned butcher and entered the sheriff's service. Whoa. Here's our stanza. The butcher he answered, jolly Robin, no matter where I do dwell, for a butcher I am, and to Nottingham I am going my meat to sell. 3 days later, one of Will Stutley's fellows struck down a fine stag. As he and others had stepped from cover to seize it, a stag is a deer, okay? 20 of the sheriff's men appeared at the end of the glade. Will's men dropped down on all fours, barely in time to hear a shower of arrows whistle above their heads. Then from behind the trees they sent back such an answer that the sheriff's men would come no closer. 2 of them, in truth, took unpleasant wounds in their shoulders from the encounter. When they returned to town, the sheriff turned red with rage. What? He grasped. Do my men fear to fight this Robin Hood face to face? If only I could get him within my reach once, we would see then. What it was the sheriff would see he did not say, but soon he had his wish granted. The next day and the one following, Little John was missing. One of the men said that he saw him talking with the beggar, but did not know where they had gone. 2 more days passed. Robin grew uneasy. He feared the king's foresters had captured Little John. At last, Robin could not remain quiet. Up he sprang with bow and arrows and a short sword at his side. I must go to Nottingham, he cried. The sheriff has long desired to see me, and perhaps he can tell me news of the best quarterstaff in the shire, meaning Little John. A quarterstaff is a long, strong wooden stick used as a weapon, and a shire is an English country. Those that have watched or read Lord of the Rings, Frodo lived in a shire. Others asked to go with him, but he would not let them. Nay, he said, but tarry in the edge of the wood opposite the west gate of the town, and you may be of service tomorrow night. So saying, he went to the road leading to Nottingham and stood as before, looking up and down to see if the way were clear. Back at bend in the road he heard a rumbling, when up drove a stout butcher, whistling gaily and driving a horse that walked slowly because of the weight of meat loaded in the cart. Good day to you, friend, hailed Robin. Where are you going with your load of meat? Good day to you, returned the butcher. I am but a simple butcher on my way to Nottingham. 'Tis fair week, and my beef and mutton will bring a fair penny. But who are you? Men call me Robin Hood. The saints protect me, said the butcher in terror. I heard of you and how you lighten the purses of the fat priests and knights. But I am only but a poor butcher, selling this load of meat, perhaps for enough to pay my rent. Rest, my friend, rest, said Robin. I would not take as much as a penny from you, for I love an honest face and a good name with my neighbors, but I would strike a bargain. He took a well-filled purse from his belt and continued, I would like to be a butcher today and sell meat at Nottingham. Could you sell me your meat, your cart, your horse, and your goodwill for 5 gold pieces? Heaven bless ye, good Robin, cried the butcher joyfully. That can I. And he leaped down from the cart and handed Robin the reins in exchange for the purse. One moment more, laughed Robin. We must change garments for the time being. Take mine and scurry home, lest the king's foresters try to put a hole through this Lincoln green. So he donned the butcher's shirt and apron and drove to the town. When he came to Nottingham, he went to the marketplace. Boldly he led his shuffling horse to where the butchers had their stalls. He had no notion of the price to ask for his meat, but thus he called aloud, Hark ye, lasses and dames, hark ye, good meat come buy, come buy. 3 pennies worth go for 1 penny, and a kiss is good, say I. People crowded round his cart, for he really did sell 3 times as much for 1 penny as was sold by the other butchers, and 1 or 2 lasses liked his face so well that they willingly gave him a kiss. But the other butchers were angry when they found how he was taking their trade, and so they put their heads together. One said, Perhaps he has sold his father's land, and this is his first try at trading. Another said, Perhaps he has murdered a butcher and stolen his horse and meat. Robin heard these sayings, but only laughed and sang his song louder. The people laughed also, and crowded round his cart closely, shouting uproariously when some lass agreed to be kissed. Then the butchers said to him, Come, brother butcher, if you would sell meat with us, you must join our guild and go by the rules of our trade. And we've learned about guilds in our history class, but let's have a little refresher. A guild is an association formed by merchants or craftsmen to control trade in a product or service. Each chose a symbol of its trade. We dine at the sheriff's mansion today, said another, and you must be one of us. I'll go with you, my brothers, said jolly Robin, and as fast as I can. Then, having sold all his meat, he left his horse and cart in the care of a friendly innkeeper, and followed the butchers to the mansion. It was the sheriff's custom to host guilds of the trades from time to time on fair days, for he got a pretty profit out of the fees they paid him for the right to trade in the marketplace. The sheriff had already come into the banqueting room with great pomp when Robin Hood and 3 or 4 butchers entered. The sheriff mentioned Robin to sit by his right hand, at the head of the table, for 1 or 2 butchers had whispered to him, "That fellow was mad. He sold more meat for 1 penny than we could sell for 3, and he gave extra weight to any lass who would kiss him." Others said, "He does not know the value of goods, and may be cheated by a shrewd man." The sheriff was willing to cheat any man, and he was glad to have a quest to promise to enliven the feast. So he made much of Robin and laughed loudly at his jests. Though, to tell the truth, the laugh came easily, for Robin had never been in a merrier mood, and his jests soon put the whole table in a roar. Then the Lord Bishop of Hereford came in, last of all, to say grace and take his seat on the other side of the sheriff. After grace was said, and while the servants clattered in with meat platters, Robin stood up and said, "Amen, I say to my Lord Bishop, thanks. Now, my fine fellows, be merry and drink deep, for I'll pay for all before I go my way. Though it cost me 5 pounds and more, spare not the wine." "Hear, hear," shouted the butchers. "Now are you a jolly soul?" said the sheriff, "but this feast is mine. You must have many head of cattle and many acres of broad land to spend so freely." "Aye, that I have," returned Robin. "My brothers and I have 500 head, and none of them have we been able to sell. That is why I have turned butcher. But I do not know the trade, and would gladly sell the whole herd if I could find a buyer." At this the sheriff's greed began to rise. 500 head, you say? 510 by actual count. That I would sell for 20 pieces of gold. Is that too much to ask? Was there ever such an idiot butcher? Thought the sheriff as he nudged the bishop in his fat ribs. "Nay, good fellow," said he, chuckling, "I am always ready to help anyone in my shire, and since you cannot find a buyer at this price, I will buy them myself." At this Robin began praising the sheriff to the skies and telling him that he would not forget the kindness. "Tut, tut," said the sheriff, "it's nothing but a trade. Drive in your herd tomorrow to the marketplace, and you shall have money down." "Nay, excellence," said Robin, "I cannot easily do that, for they are grazing in scattered fashion over near Gamewell. Will you not come and choose your own beasts tomorrow?" "Aye, that I will," said the sheriff. "Stay with me overnight, and I will go with you in the morning." Robin did not like the idea of staying overnight at the sheriff's house. He had hoped to appoint a meeting place, but he now saw that this might raise doubts about him. He looked round at the company, but this time the butchers were deep in their cups, meaning drunk. The sheriff and Robin had talked in a low voice, and the Lord Bishop was almost asleep. "Agreed," said Robin presently, and the words were no sooner out of his mouth than the door opened, and a serving man entered bearing a tray of spiced wine. At the sight of the fellow's face, Robin gave a start of surprise that he instantly checked. The other also saw him, stood still a moment, and as if forgetting something, turned about and left the hall. It was Little John. A dozen questions flashed across Robin's mind. What was Little John doing in the sheriff's house? Why had he not told the band? Was he true to them? Would he betray him? But these questions were dismissed from Robin's mind as soon as they entered. He knew that Little John was faithful and true. Robin began foolish banter again for the amusement of the sheriff and his guests, all being now merry with wine. "A song!" one of them shouted, and the cry was taken up round the table. Robin stood on his chair and sang out, "A lass and a butcher of Nottingham agreed between them for to wed. Says he, I'll give ye the meat, fair dame, and ye will give me the bread." Then they joined in the chorus, pounding their cups on the tables. "With a hey and a ho, and a hey nonny no, a butcher of Nottingham." While the song was at its height, Little John reappeared with other servants. He came up to Robin, and, as if asking him if he would have more wine, said softly, "Meet me in the pantry tonight." Robin nodded and sang loudly. The hour was late, and presently the company broke up. The sheriff told his servant to show Robin to his room and promised to see him at breakfast. Robin kept his word and met Little John that night and the sheriff the next day. But first, let us turn to the story of how Little John came to be in the sheriff's mansion. Okay, we just read about how Robin became the butcher and was meeting with the sheriff. Now it's going to learn how Little John entered the sheriff's service. "List and hearken, gentlemen, all ye that now be here. Of Little John that was knight's man, good mirth ye shall now hear." It was a fair day at Nottingham, and people crowded through all the gates. Goods of many kinds were displayed in gaily colored booths, and at every street corner a free show was going on. Here and there, stages had been erected for matches at quarterstaff, a highly popular sport. One fellow, Eric of Lincoln, was thought to be the finest man with the staff for miles around. His feats were sung about in ballads through all the shire. He was a great boaster, and today he strutted about on one of these corner stages and offered to crack any man's head for a shilling. Several had tried their skill with Eric, but he had soon sent them spinning, to the jeers of the onlookers. A beggar sat near Eric's stage and grinned every time a head was whacked. He was a ragged fellow, dirty and unshaven. Eric caught sight of the beggar, scoffing at one of his boasts, and turned toward him sharply. "How now, you dirty villain," said he. "Mend your manners toward those who are better than you, or, by Our Lady, I'll dust your rags for you." By Our Lady is a reference to the Virgin Mary, used as a prayer or promise. The beggar still grinned. "I am always ready to mend my manners to my betters," he said, "but I am afraid you cannot teach me any better than you can dust my jacket." Come up," roared Eric, flourishing his staff. "That I will," said the beggar, getting up with difficulty. "It will be a huge pleasure to me to take a braggart down a notch, if some good man will lend me a stout quarterstaff." Several men offered him their staves, and he took the stoutest and heaviest of all. He made a sorry figure as he climbed awkwardly up upon the stage, but once there he towered a full head above Eric of Lincoln. Still, he held his stick so clumsily that the crowd laughed with glee. Now each man looked the other up and down, watching warily for an opening. They stood so only for a moment. Eric, intent on sweeping this rash beggar speedily off the stage, attacked boldly and gave him a sounding crack on the shoulder. The beggar danced about as though he would drop his staff from the pain. While the crowd roared, Eric raised his staff for another crushing blow. But just then the beggar came to life. Like a flash, he dealt Eric a backhanded blow, such as he had never before seen. Down he went to the floor with a heavy thump, and the fickle people yelled themselves purple, for it was a new sight to see Eric of Lincoln eating dust. But he was up again almost as soon as he had fallen, and he quickly retreated to his own ringside to gather his wits and watch for an opening. Those who stood around now saw the merriest game of quarterstaff that was ever played inside the walls of Nottingham. Both men fenced with fine skill. Again and again Eric sought an opening under the other's guard, and just as often his blows were parried, the beggar stood sturdily beating off the attack. For a long time their blows met with steady cracks, and Eric tried to be wary, but he grew mad at last and began to send down blows so fierce and fast that you would have sworn a hailstorm was pounding the roof over your head. Yet he never broke the tall beggar's guard. Then at last the stranger changed his style of fighting. With one upward stroke he sent Eric's staff whirling through the air. With another he tapped Eric on the head, and with a third broad swing, before Eric could recover, knocked him off the stage. People shouted and made so much ado that the shopkeepers left their stalls, and others came running from every direction. The victory of the beggar made him immensely popular. Eric had been a great bully, and many had suffered insults at his hands. So the ragged stranger found money and food and drink offered everywhere, and he feasted comfortably till the afternoon. Then a longbow contest came on, and the beggar went to it with some of his new friends. It was held in the same arena that Robin had triumphed in, and again the sheriff and lords and ladies graced the scene with their presences. Here's a little picture of the beggar beating Eric of Lincoln. Can you guess who the beggar is? When the archers had stepped forward, the herald proclaimed the rules of the game. Each man would shoot 3 shots, and he who shot best would win the prize of a team of oxen. A dozen bowmen were there, and among them some of the best fellows in the foresters and sheriff's companies. Down at the end of the line towered the tall beggar. Down at the end of the line towered the tall beggar. The sheriff noted him and asked, "Who is that ragged fellow?" "He who cracked the crown of Eric of Lincoln," was the reply. The shouting presently began, and last of all came the beggar's turn. "By your leave," he said loudly, "I'd like to shoot with any man here at a mark of my own placing." And he walked down the field with a slender peeled sapling, which he struck upright in the ground. "There," he said, is a right good mark. Will any man try it?" But no archer would risk his reputation on so small a target. Shortly the beggar drew his bow with seeming carelessness and split the sapling with his arrow. "Long live the beggar!" yelled the bystanders. The sheriff swore a curse and said, "This man is the best archer that I've ever yet saw." He beckoned to him and asked, "Good fellow, what is your name, and where were you born?" "In Holderness, where I was born," the man replied. "Men call me Reynold Greenleaf. Reynold Greenleaf." "You are a sturdy fellow, Reynold Greenleaf, and deserve better apparel than that you wear. Will you enter my service? I will give you 20 marks a year above your living, and 3 good suits of clothes." "3 good suits, you say? Then I will enter your service gladly, for my back has been bare many long days." Then Reynold turned to the crowd and shouted, "Hear ye, good people! I have entered the sheriff's service, and do not need the steers for a prize, so take them for yourselves to feast on." At this, the crowd shouted more merrily than ever and threw their caps high into the air. No one as popular as Reynold Greenleaf had come to Nottingham in many a day. Now you may have guessed by this time who Reynold Greenleaf really was. Little John. 2 days passed by. Little John insisted on eating the sheriff's best bread and drinking his best wine. Still the sheriff held him in high esteem and talked of taking him along on the next hunting trip. It was now the day of the butcher's banquet. The banquet hall was not in the main house, but connected with it by a corridor. All the servants were bustling about preparing for the feast, except Little John, who lay in bed the greater part of the day. But he presented himself at last when the dinner was half over, and wishing to see the guests for himself, he went with the other servants to serve the wine. First, however, some of the wine passed his own lips while he went down the corridor. When he entered the banqueting hall, whom should he see but Robin Hood himself? Imagine the surprise felt by each of these bold fellows upon seeing the other in such unexpected company. But they kept their secrets and arranged to meet each other that same night. Meanwhile, the proud sheriff did not know that he sheltered the 2 chief outlaws of the whole countryside beneath his roof. After the feast was over and the hour grew late, Little John fell faint and remembered that he had not eaten at all that day. Back he went to the pantry to see what food might be left, but there, locking up for the night, stood the fat steward. "Good sir steward," said Little John, "give me food, please." The steward looked at him grimly and rattled the keys on his belt. "Sir la abed," said he, "'tis late in the day to talk of eating. Since you have waited this long to be hungry, you can take your appetite back to bed again." "Now that I will not do," cried Little John. "Your own paunch of fat would be enough for any bear to sleep on through the winter, but my stomach wants food, and food it shall have." Saying this, he brushed past the steward and tried the door, but it was locked. The fat steward chuckled and jangled his keys again. Then Little John was mad. He hammered his huge fist on the door panel with a blow that split an opening you could put your hand through. Little John had stooped and peered through the hole to see what food lay within reach, when the steward's keys went cracked upon his head. Then he turned on the steward and gave him such a rap that the fat fellow went rolling on the floor. "Lie there," said Little John, "till ye find strength to go to bed. Meanwhile, I'll be about my dinner." He kicked open the pantry and brought out a venison pie and a cold roast pheasant. Placing these down on a convenient shelf, Little John ate and drank as much as he wished. Now the sheriff had in his kitchen a cook, a man strong and brave, who heard the noise and came in to see what had happened. There sat Little John eating away, while the fat steward was rolled under the table like a bundle of rags. "Is this how you ask for your supper?" said the cook, as he drew a sword that hung at his side. "You are a foolish man to come between me and my meat," said Little John. "So defend yourself and see that you prove the better man." And he drew his own sword and crossed weapons with the cook. Back and forth they clashed. They fought stiffly, and neither thought of quitting, but for a full hour neither could touch the other. "I swear," cried Little John, "you are the best swordsman that I ever yet saw. What do you say to resting and eating and drinking with me? Then we'll return to our swords." "Agreed," said the cook, who loved good food as well as a good fight, and they both laid down their swords and began eating heartily. The venison pie soon disappeared. Then the warriors rested a while, patted their stomachs, and smiled across at each other like best friends. For when a man has eaten, he looks out pleasantly upon the world. "And now, Reynold Greenleaf," said the cook, "we may as well settle this fight." "True," answered Little John. "But first tell me, friend, for you are my friend from now on, what is the score we have to settle?" "Who can handle the sword the best?" said the cook. "In truth, I expect to carve you up like a frying chicken by now." "And I expected to shave your ears by now," replied Little John. "We can settle this bout in good time, but just now my master and I have have need of you, and you can turn your blade to better service than that of the sheriff." "Whose service would that be?" asked the cook. "Mine," answered the would-be butcher, entering the room. "And I am Robin Hood." All right. That is how Little John got in the service of the sheriff. I'm going to grab a drink of water really quick, and we will read our last chapter, which is chapter 5, how the sheriff lost 3 servants and found them again. All right. "Make good cheer," said Robin Hood. "Sheriff, for charity, and for the love of Little John, thy life is granted thee." The cook gasped in amazement. "Robin Hood, under the sheriff's very roof? Now you are a brave fellow," he said. "I have heard great tales of your skill, but who might this be? Men call me Little John." "Then, Little John, I like you well, on my honor, as much the miller's son, and you too, Robin Hood. If you'll take me, I'll enter your service right gladly." "Spoken like a brave man," said Robin, seizing him by the hand. "But I must get back to my own bed, lest I be found here. Lucky for us, wine flowed freely in this house today, or else the noise of your combat would have brought others besides me. Now flee the house tonight, and I will join you in the forest tomorrow." "But master," said the cook, "you should not stay here overnight. Come with us. The sheriff has set a strict watch on all the gates, but I know the warden at the west gate, and can get us through safely. Tomorrow you will be stopped." "Nay, I will not," laughed Robin. "I shall go through the sheriff himself. Now you, Little John, and you, Much, the miller's son, go quickly. In the borders of the wood you will find my merry men. Tell them to kill 2 fine stags for tomorrow's supper, for we shall have great company." And Robin left them as suddenly as he had come. "Comrade," said Little John then, "we may as well bid the sheriff's roof farewell. But before we go, it seems a true pity not to take some of the sheriff's silver plate to remember him by." "Indeed," said the cook. So they got a large sack and filled it with silver plate from the shelves, taken so that it would not be noticed as missing, swung the sack between them, and went into the friendly shelter of Sherwood Forest. The next morning the servants awoke late in the sheriff's house. The steward's cracked head was still in such a whirl that the theft went undiscovered for the time being. Robin Hood met the sheriff at breakfast. His host soon spoke of what was uppermost in his heart, the purchase of that fine herd of cattle near Gamewell. It was clear that a vision of them had been in his dreams, and again Robin seemed such a silly fellow that the sheriff saw no need of hiding his thoughts, but said that he was ready to look at the herd at once. So they set forth, Robin in his little butcher's cart, pulling by the lean mare, and the sheriff mounted on a horse. Out of Nottingham they took the road leading through Sherwood Forest, and as they plunged deeper among the trees, Robin whistled and sang snatches of tunes. "Why are you so happy?" said the sheriff. To tell the truth, the silence of the woods was making him uneasy. "I am whistling to keep my courage up," replied Robin. "What is there to fear when you have the sheriff of Nottingham beside you?" said the other. Robin scratched his head. "They say that Robin Hood and his men care nothing for the sheriff," he said. "Pooh," said the sheriff angrily. "I would not give that," and he snapped his fingers, "for their lives if I could once lay hands upon them." "But Robin Hood himself was on this very road the last time I came to town," said the other. The sheriff jumped at the crackling of a twig under his horse's feet and looked around. "Did you see him?" he asked. "Aye, that did I. He wanted the use of this mare and cart to drive to Nottingham. He said he would like to be butcher. But look." As he spoke, he came to a turn in the road, and before them stood a herd of the king's deer grazing. Robin pointed to them and said, "There is my herd of cattle, good sheriff. How do you like them? Are they not fat?" The sheriff drew rein quickly. "Now, fellow," said he, "I wish I were out of this forest, for I do not care to see such herds as these, or such faces as yours. Now go your own way, whoever you are, and let me go mine." "Nay," laughed Robin, seizing the sheriff's bridle. "I have taken too many pains to have your company to give up so easily. Besides, I wish you to meet my friends and dine with me, since you have so lately entertained me at your table." So saying, he clapped a horn to his lips and blew 3 notes. The deer bounded away. There came a rustling, and out from behind came 40 men clad in Lincoln green and bearing bows in their hands and short swords at their sides. They ran up to Robin Hood and lifted their caps to him respectfully, while the sheriff sat still from amazement. "Welcome to Greenwood," said one of the men, bending his knee in mock reverence before the sheriff. The sheriff glared. It was Little John. "Reynold Greenleaf," he said, "you have betrayed me." "I swear," said Little John, "that you are to blame, master. I was denied my dinner when I was at your house, but we shall sit down to a feast we hope you will enjoy." "Well spoken, Little John," said Robin Hood. "Take his bridle and let us honor the guest who has come to feast with us." Then the whole company plunged into the heart of the forest. After twisting and turning through the trees until the sheriff's head was dizzy, the men came to an open space flanked by wide-spreading oaks. Under the largest of these a fire was crackling, and near it 2 fine stags lay ready for cooking. Around the blaze was gathered a company of yeomen quite as large as that which came with Robin Hood. They sprang up and saluted their leader. "Good fellows," cried Robin Hood, "while our new cook is preparing a feast worthy of our guest, let us have a few games to do him honor." Then while the whole glade filled with the savory smell of roasting venison, and brown pastries warmed beside the blaze, and spiced wine set out a cordial fragrance, Robin Hood placed the sheriff beneath the largest oak and sat down by him. The best archers of the band set up a small pole 100 paces away and tied a wreath to it. The archers began to shoot, and anyone who did not shoot through the garland without touching its leaves was given a good sound rap by Little John. But the shooting was expert, for the men practiced daily, and many shafts sped cleanly through the circle. Nonetheless, now and again, some unlucky fellow would miss and would be sent spinning from a blow from the tall lieutenant, while the glade echoed with laughter and a hearty guffaw. Guffaw. Let's see how we pronounce that. 1 second. Guffaw. It's a loud and boisterous laugh. Let's see how we...
Guffaw.
Guffaw. Okay, so guffaw, is that how you pronounce it? So a hearty guffaw even came from the sheriff's own throat, for the spirit of Sherwood Forest was upon him. But presently his mood was dashed. The company sat down to eat, and the guest had 2 more surprises. The cook came forward to serve the food, and the sheriff saw his own servant, whom he supposed was at that moment in the kitchen at Nottingham. Much, the miller's son, grinned at the sheriff's amazement and served the plates. Then the sheriff gasped and nearly choked with rage. It was his own silverware. "You rascals," he sputtered. "Was it not enough to take my servants? Must you also rob me of my best silver? On my life, I will not touch your food." "Gramercy," said Robin Hood. Gramercy is a word used to express astonishment or gratitude. It comes from grand mercy, French words meaning great thanks. "The platters are only used to do your worship honor, and as for your life, for the love of Little John, your life is granted you." So the sheriff sat down again, and soon the cook's dishes were disappearing down his throat as rapidly as the next man's. They feasted royally and clinked each other's cups until the sun no longer showed the pattern of the leaves upon the forest carpet. Then the sheriff rose and said, "I thank you, Robin Hood, once a butcher, and you, Little John, once a beggar, and you, Much, once a cook, and all you good men who have entertained me in Sherwood so well. I make no promises as to how I shall repay you when you come to Nottingham next, for I follow the king's commands, but the shadows grow long, and I must leave, if you will please show me to the road." Then Robin Hood and all his men rose and drank the sheriff's health. And Robin said, "If you must go at once, we will not keep you, except that you have forgotten 2 things." "What may they be?" asked the sheriff, while his heart sank within him. "You forgot that you came with me today to buy a herd of cattle, and he who dines at Greenwood Inn must pay the landlord." The sheriff fidgeted like a boy who has forgotten his lesson. "What is that sum?" asked Little John. "For my own wages should also come out of it." "And mine," said Much. "And mine," smiled Robin. The sheriff caught his breath. "Are all these silver dishes worth anything?" The outlaws roared at this. "I'll tell you what, worship," said Robin. We 3 rascally servants will settle our back wages for those plates, and we will keep the herd of cattle free for our own use and the king's. But this little tavern bill should be paid. Now, what sum have you about you?" "I have only these 20 pieces of gold and 20 others," said the sheriff. And it was well that he told the truth, for Robin said, "Count it, Little John." Little John turned the sheriff's wallet inside out. "'Tis true enough," he said. "Then you shall pay no more than 20 pieces for your entertainment," decreed Robin. "Is it fair, men of Greenwood?" "Good," echoed the others. "The sheriff should swear by his patron saint that he will not molest us," said Will Stuteley. Patron saint is a saint who prays to help and protection. St. George, who is often shown killing a dragon, is the patron saint of England. "So be it then," cried Little John, approaching the sheriff. "Now, swear by your life and your patron saint." "I swear by St. George," said the sheriff vigorously, "that I will never disturb the outlaws in Sherwood. But let me catch any of you out of Sherwood," he thought to himself, and the 20 pieces of gold were paid, and the sheriff prepared to depart. "I shall keep my company myself for part of the way," said Robin, "for 'twas I who brought you into the wood." And he took the sheriff's horse by the bridle and led him through many thickets until they reached the main road. "Now farewell, sheriff," said Robin, "and next time you think of cheating a poor man, remember the cattle you tried to buy at Gamewell." So saying, he slapped the horse's rear, and off went the sheriff on the road to Nottingham. Okay, that is it for this week, guys. Chapters 1 through 5 plus the introduction. It's been fun to read about all these adventures and how Rob became Robin Hood and Little John, and how they all meeting, and now how they've kind of outwitted the sheriff and took things from him. Hope you're enjoying it. We will have Thanksgiving next week, but then we'll continue to read Robin Hood the week after, be able to finish it this quarter. If you have any questions about Robin Hood or any other subjects, please reach out to me. Remember to stay on top and get caught up with all of your assignments. The end of the quarter is coming very quickly, and I want you all to be successful and have a good time learning, even though we're learning online. I will see you guys in the next video. Have a good day.